got a question I want to ask.
What?
What if this turns out to be really good?
Well, it won't.
No, but what if it does?
Well, it won't, will it?
Yes, I'm recording this on the same day as the video about the small year 7s, just try and ignore that. So this was a speech I had to do for school, and I thought I'd make a good JXE or Mauler style video, just on a bit of a budget, and seeing as all I seem to do these days is copy off other YouTubers. So a lot of people were talking about pretty serious topics and subjects, so I thought I'd step in just to just bring things a little bit back down to earth. Ironic choice of words there considering the subject matter, but that's besides the point. So a lot of people were out here talking animal rights, feminism, I don't actually know because we haven't actually read them yet, but various other serious things, and I'm just here like, Rian Johnson bad. Kind of, yes, but maybe not quite as much, but still quite bad, but maybe not, yeah, let's just go. I'd like to preface this by saying that I'm in no way what you would consider a Star Wars fan or expert. By which I mean I've only seen the main films once in release order a few months ago and had a completely reasonably enjoyable time while watching them. I bring this up only to identify myself as a very level-headed viewer, less likely to be easily swayed by loyalty or nostalgia-based bias. With that addressed, let's begin. When a film is genuinely bad, blame is often laid at the door of the directors and writers behind it, and understandably so, as they're most likely to be the root causes of the film's faults. This is a very common event, as it seems to be increasingly difficult to find good films which are agreed upon by the majority of viewers and critics to be so. This is especially true when the film is a sequel or in some way connected to a larger overall franchise. However, it's far less often that a film is so divisive between fans as to cause what is essentially a solid divide between those who believe it to be the worst of the series and those who believe it to be the best of its trilogy. I don't think anyone thinks Last Jedi is better than any originals, do they? With few people seemingly sitting on the fence. The divisive film I'm talking about is obviously Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi, both written and directed solely by Rian Johnson. Johnson's choices in what direction to take Star Wars is often the go-to target for frustrated fans' anger, and understandably so, as I personally think it's an overall bad film when entirely in context, and to be honest, even out of context to an extent, and like to do the same for at least the sake of a casual complaint. But I wanted to find out more about what made this film so divisive and hateable. So I'm here with this random citizen to find out their thoughts in a lengthy interview about The Last Jedi.
Well, you know, actually, I quite like it.
Right, Luke, come on, we're leaving. Amongst other things, I, as do many others, think Johnson's direction and habit for prioritisation of subversion of expectations and shock value over logical story continuation expose a larger issue within the sequel trilogy as a whole, that being its lack of overall planning. The Force Awakens, the prior film, while being basically a beat-for-beat remake of A New Hope, clearly establishes characters, for example Snoke as a main villain. However, The Last Jedi kills him off in what is one of the many twists in Kylo Ren's deliberately ambiguous morals. I'm somewhat on the fence as to whether those ambiguous morals are a good or bad thing, but either way I can't blame them on Rian Johnson, considering they're consistent throughout the whole trilogy. With no regard for who the main villain can now be, and leaving the returning J.J. Abrams with nothing the audience has had any time to become familiar with at least, to work with for the final film in the trilogy. As good as forcing him to bring back Palpatine with as good as no explanation, and with as good as no explanation for why Snoke even existed in the first place provided by any of the films. I realise it's probably explained in like some comic or something, but I'm talking about the films here. Yet when he's given the chance to kill a main character for whom it would make sense, such as Finn or Leia, he chooses not to. In the case of the former, where it would have been a heroic death for a character whose arc was long completed, and the latter, where not doing so required introducing a whole new Force ability and causing yet more controversy amongst fans. Fans? With all this said, the fault is clearly not with the writing and directing abilities of Johnson himself, as other films for which he filled these roles, such as Knives Out, have been far less divisive in their reception, with far more overall positive reception at that. With this in mind, let's take The Last Jedi as far away out of the possible context let's not do that. With this in mind, let's take The Last Jedi as far out of the overall context of the Star Wars franchise as possible, and treat it as independently as possible. With this in mind, I rewatched the film, thinking of it as a standalone as much as possible, and the inevitable other issues created by treating any sequel as a standalone notwithstanding, the experience was considerably better, at least for me. And all of this brings us to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because of course it does. The long-term franchise-wide planning put into which outdoes every other similar franchise, and the reach and sheer magnitude of which has arguably conditioned the average viewer into expecting such fluid and successful intertextuality as standard. By this I mean many viewers of modern Star Wars media are very likely to have also seen at least some amount of modern Marvel media, and this may be, subconsciously or otherwise, causing them to draw comparisons and holding the former to a standard of interconnectivity and intertextuality that would have been seen as unreasonably high before the latter instilled it within them. This is further amplified by Marvel's releasing of as many as 3 mainstream cinematic films per year since 2008, compared to Star Wars' releasing of 1 episodical sequel trilogy installment every 2 years between 2015 and 19. These release dates add to this even further by making the Star Wars releases around the same time as those of the biggest MCU features so far in Infinity War and Endgame in 2018 and 19. So, in conclusion, while The Last Jedi remains the most controversial and divisive of the Star Wars films so far, it may be unfair to lay all of the blame at Rian Johnson's door. With that said, some aspects such as those deaths and lacks thereof and Holdo's just entire character I would still hold very much against him. Oh yeah, and while we're at it, can I just complain about Lucasfilm's inability to keep Yoda looking consistent between the trilogies? Just use the same puppet! Also, Daniel needs to get extension over his double garage. Thank you for coming with my TED Talk.
Something.
We might have to kind of like stand more either side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that should work. If I stand there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it. That should work.
Right. Where's the freeze?